Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. The number of times that I see, hear, or read this from women who are in relationships, I'm basically talking about heteronormative relationships, but the amount of women that I hear saying in response to my question of, will they go to therapy, is like, no, he won't go to therapy. And so, I mean, what do you do with that, right? You can't make someone do it. You can't make someone go to therapy. And yet, if you've gotten to the place where probably you've done some therapy yourself, or you've done some, self-development, or you've done some internal healing and introspection, and you've done some work, right? And you're recognizing that, hey, there's some stuff going on there that really needs to be dealt with, and you're carrying around a lot of unhealed wounds, and yet when I ask you to go to therapy, you're just flat out refusing. And yet I know that those things are what's causing some of the rifts in relationships, right? So it's like, you just, what do you do in that case? And so what often happens is that one person will continue to go to therapy, and they're growing and they're healing, and they start to outgrow their partner, right? They're just not in the same mindset. They have discovered a self-love that doesn't allow for them to continue to have weak boundaries. And then it really starts to show up in the relationship with the other person not wanting to do their own work, and resentments will build up, and it'll get harder and harder for them to find common ground, right? So what do you do if your partner won't go to therapy? I think you need to have a serious conversation with them and be like, look, I get it. Therapy's hard. It's it can be really, really hard work. And yet when you find the right therapist and the right type of therapy for you, it doesn't have to be this long drawn out process. It doesn't have to be this excruciating thing that you relive your childhood and you cry and it's agony. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be this whole thing that I think they've, worked up in their mind. Or it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that there was something that, hurt you, that you didn't have the resources to heal from at the time and integrate, whether that was something that went on continuously or on a regular basis, or if it's just something that happened that caused trauma, but you didn't have any help to deal with it. Like, there's nothing to be ashamed of in that. And there's a lot of really great male coaches and therapists out there now that I could understand if they were like, well, I just don't want to go talk to a woman. I don't think she'll understand my perspective. I would, I don't think I'd be able to open up and share, and that's valid, right? So there's tons and tons of great male therapists and coaches out there. And I really do think that it's a matter of finding the right one. And let's be real, the whole entire world is now open to you, your partner, your family. There are tons of great helper healers out there working on the internet, just like I am, right? I have a whole group of people that I can tap into depending on, what the issues are and the demographic, right? So typically when I work with couples, I'll see them individually, but a lot of times I feel more comfortable just sort of referring the man in the relationship to another therapist who works with men specifically, because my niche is typically women or LGBTQ folks, right? And it's a lot around self-love and all of that kind of work. And so I don't generally appeal to men. I have had male clients, and they've come to me for other things, obviously. And there was just something, I guess, about the way that I was talking about some aspect of mental health or whatever that spoke to them, and so they reached out to me. And so I don't have a problem with working with men, but a lot of times I do recognize that for a lot of men, they feel more comfortable working with another male. And so I will usually refer them off to a colleague of mine, and then I'll work with the wife. And so then what we can do is we can come back together after they both had their sessions and done their work and had time to process and whatnot. And then it might even be like months down the road, they'll reach out to me and be like, okay, yeah, now we're ready to sit down. Sometimes it's just a few weeks. It just doesn't follow a particular timeline, but it could be, we've reached this place of our journey now, and we're feeling this about what we've discovered about ourselves and our relationship. And now we're looking for more of a coaching kind of scenario, in that we need some help maybe with communication and stuff like that. So there's resources that I can provide to them for those sorts of things, right? So it's sort of a two-faced approach when I'm working with couples. If I'm just working with the woman, then we'll have our sessions, and they'll do the work, and it will be, they'll go off and process, and then typically I don't hear from them again, because there's no need to sort of, figure out where they are now as a couple, right? So we just do the follow-up often because we want to find, okay, now what do we need as a couple going forward? What resources would help? And that's sort of what I help them with. But generally speaking, my clients have sessions with me, and within a few sessions, and this is the same for a lot of my colleagues, within one or two sessions, we usually get to the root of what's going on, and we untangle all of that for them, or they untangle it for themselves, typically. And then they go on, and they're processing, and then they get on with life, right? So that we don't need to keep seeing them over and over again. And I think that that's appealing to a lot of men. And I think that was maybe one of the things in my, talking about what I do and who I help, was one of the points that they said, like, yeah, the fact that you could have quick results was really something that drew me to working with you. And so, I can assure you that the colleagues that I would refer them to, if you have a spouse who wants to work with another man, or a woman who works with strictly male clients, that's their niche. Maybe that's what they've really become experts in. And so, and I don't claim to be an expert in men, and that, most of my experience has been working with women. And so there are certain, themes and whatnot that come up around being a woman, or being an LGBTQ plus person, in the way that it doesn't necessarily come up for a cis man, right? So there's just some different issues and whatnot to work through that aren't the same for men. And so I have colleagues, both male and female, who work with men, cis men, and that's their niche and who they specialize in working with. So I have lots of resources to share and referrals to give, if that's something that you think is maybe one of the barriers. So often it's, I don't want to spend a long time, like I don't want to spend hours upon hours and weeks after weeks and months after months going to a therapist. Sorry, my nose is just really itchy today, so I keep kind of scratching, but allergies. Time is a thing. And then comfort is another thing. Like, am I going to feel comfortable about opening up to these people? Most of the people that I work with, as far as colleagues go, they have an online presence. They do things like I do, like they're getting on and talking about who they help and how they help. And so you can go on and watch, much like people come on and watch mine, hopefully, and get a sense of who we are and where we work best in and whatnot, and whether you think that we could be helpful, right? So all of my colleagues are doing the same things in order to, be out there and be accessible and and to share what we do. And so I can share a few people's profiles, and you can go off and watch some of their content, and maybe even reach out by private message and have conversations with them to get a sense of whether, even before you book a free consultation call, you can sense, like, would this be a person that I'd want to work with or not, right? So sometimes that's really helpful, just knowing that it's not the same as showing up in a practice where there's a bunch of psychologists and therapists and excuse me, and other practitioners working in the same building, and maybe they're all under like one group thing, and maybe you just get referred to the first available therapist. I don't know, maybe they do an intake form and then they try to match you up with who they think would be the best fit, but you still don't know them going in. And so you'll spend probably the first few sessions, and they're only hour-long sessions, just getting to know this person and building rapport. Whereas if you've had a chance to watch someone's work and listen to them and how they interact with people in their feeds and whatnot, and what kind of information they share, you have a general sense of maybe whether there's the possibility of connection. And I think that's sort of like the important first step. And then when you have that free consultation call or strategy call, depending what they call it, it's an opportunity for you to talk to them and ask them questions about the work that they do and how they can help you. And so it feels much more personal. And then also, so if at that point, at the end of that call, you still haven't lost anything, but maybe, an hour of your life when you consider watching videos and having a strategy call or consultation call. So it will cost you really very little to figure out whether you want to work with that person or not. So for men, that can be really, that can really help with doing away with some of the barriers. And then another one that I just get commonly is it costs too much. And so what I usually say to people is, depending on your medical coverage, you don't have a whole lot of coverage for psychological care or mental health care, right? So look at your policy, find out how much you have, and then check around and see how much people charge for an hour-long session. Because I think when you do the math, well, I don't think, I know, when you do the math on the work that I do and the quick results that I get, it works out that you would have spent that money anyways. You would have spent it in, probably 3 or 4 sessions if you don't have insurance, just getting to know your therapist and trying to feel comfortable with them enough to open up. And then you'll exceed that way more, like by spending 6 months to a year working with this person. So unless they're charging a flat fee for a set number of sessions or for a breakthrough, it's not the same, and it works out costing you way more in the traditional model. So I explain that, and I think most of the therapists that I work with, coaches and therapists that I work with, they have the same kind of model, right? That they're just charging for your breakthrough, basically, or for you to feel like this has shifted so much from when we first started. And that, again, it usually only takes a session or 2. So you could spend months and hours of your time and hundreds of dollars, or you could spend maybe, 4 or 5 hours tops and get it done, right? So that's the thing. Like, so if you can condense the time is important. Time is money to a lot of people. People don't want to spend years in therapy. And they also don't want to dig up bones every single time they go to therapy and then walk out sort of feeling like, I just dredged that all up, and now what do I do with it, right? Which often happens. And they want to get value for their money, right? And so if week after week you're just going and venting, or you are being given homework that you don't end up doing because you just, you don't believe in it, or it just doesn't feel right, or whatever, you don't have time, then you won't feel like you're getting a lot of value out of your sessions. And so there's none of that with what I do. It's just we meet for a couple hours. And then maybe if you need a second session, we do a couple session, another couple hours, if that, usually. And I mean, I'm talking about like in general. And then I've had a client or two who went, 5, 6 sessions, but that was like, those are sort of the outliers, right? So yeah, so like the difference between the two is I think enough that you might be able to sway some of the men in your life who are, really resistant to therapy. And the fact that it's confidential, so it's online and it's confidential. Like when I meet with my clients, I might talk about aspects of their stories in my videos, as far as like, I have a client who is dealing with this, or I've spoken to someone who's dealing with that, but I never ever talk about them, in any way that would allow you to figure out who they are. And how could you? Because like I have, I don't know how many friends on Facebook and YouTube and like, so I get clients from all my different social media things. So it's like, you couldn't possibly know. And so it's confidential. No one's going to know. And it's not like you're driving to someone's office and parking in front of their office and everyone in your small town's going to know, oh, John's going to see the therapist. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like no one would even know. It's in the comfort of your home, or, maybe you take your phone and go for a drive and, still within like a Wi-Fi or data range. But it's completely private. And I think that's important for men too, to know that people are going to find out, because there is a lot of stigma still around men seeing, coaches and therapists. But the reality is that if you have someone in your life who is struggling with their mental health and it's affecting their relationships, then you might have to have that conversation. And I talked about how do you have the tough conversations? Well, I mean, excuse me, that's probably one of the toughest ones that people come up against in a lot of relationships, is trying to have a conversation around their mental health and how it affects you without making it about you and while still being very loving and accepting and nurturing. But it might come to the point where it's like, look, dude, either do therapy or we're done. Because if you've done all your work, and I mean, I get it, look, there's always work to do. There's always more work. We're not always gonna, it's a process, right? But if you've done a lot of work and you've been really putting in the effort to grow and evolve yourself and try to pull your relationship along, and they're just really not going to do it and like refusing to do it, then I mean, you have two choices. So the reality is that you will spend the rest of your life in therapy, because this is an ongoing issue that's not going to fix itself if only half of the equation is being fixed, right? So you can spend however, like, and so for me, it's like, well, usually what happens is the clarity that comes in sessions is what propels the change going forward. So if the change is, I'm going to do all of this work on myself, but then I'm going to stay in this toxic environment and with this person who's unwilling to change some really, really important things, right? Because I'm hearing from women who are dealing with men who don't want to communicate with them at all. They're angry, so they're showing up angry and saying hateful, hurtful, mean things to their partners. I'm hearing about, women who are feeling neglected and unloved. And so, if you've gotten to the point where you're like, I need you to go to therapy, and you've said it a million times, and you've tried everything else, right? Like you've tried modeling it, and you've tried, talking about it in different ways, and ways that, aren't shaming and aren't blaming, but are just like, I love you so much, and I want to be with you but I cannot be with this version of you that keeps showing up, that's so angry or so dismissive or so, you know what I mean? Like whatever it is, like if you've reached that point and they're still refusing to go to therapy or get coaching or something, I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. And I'm not the first, like, I'm not the person who, gets into, conversations with people and they're telling me, some, crappy things about their relationship. And I'm like, well, just leave them. You know what I mean? That's not my answer. But yet, I think, I hear from far too many women who've been with men, and we're talking like 10, 15 years, and they keep expressing their needs. They keep asking for what they want. They keep trying to change themselves and do something different about themselves in order to be worth this change in this other person. And the reality is that that person might or might not be able to change. And that really just comes down to their willingness to embark on the work. That's really all it is. And if they're not willing, they're just not willing. And I hate to say that, but the natural consequences for their behavior, so their inability to engage with something that could be healthy and helpful, the natural consequences of that could be that they end up alone because they've driven people away with their behaviors and whatnot. So, and maybe that's what needs to happen for them to learn, because, karma maybe hasn't done the job. So, and I know that sounds, for most women, they're going to be like, but I love them, and there's this about them that I love, and that about them, and they're just not all bad. And of course not. Most people aren't all bad. But if they're bad in a way that is hurtful to you, come on. And if you keep asking for change and they're refusing to get it, like, look, I get that, sometimes it takes time and people just don't get things right away, and it can be a process. But if they're not even going to step onto the path of that process, there's nothing else I can say about that. So hopefully what you got from this, though, is that I have lots of resources and other colleagues that I can refer your spouse to, and all the reasons why you can tell him that, look, it doesn't have to be what you think it is. It's actually this. And, you don't have to be this way about therapy, because this exists and this is helpful, and it's not what you think. And it's not just you sitting in a room and blah, 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 blah for an hour and then, oh, sorry, we'll talk next week. Hold on to that thought. It's not that. It's, let's get in, let's figure it out, let's, untie those knots for you, and then let's get out, right? Like, it's not this big thing, and it doesn't have to be. And, there are people all around the world, in every time zone, in every nationality, in every language that you can imagine. There are people doing therapy. So, no excuses, really. And so, if they're saying no, question that. Well, why not? Why not? Why not? And if they're like, I just don't think it's helpful. Well, why not? Where does that thinking come from? Right? Like, question it, but like, don't be like, interrogating, but like, curious. I don't feel that way. I'm curious why you do. Why do you feel that way? Maybe it's something they grew up believing. Maybe they were told that, men don't do therapy. That's for wusses or women or whatever. Right? Like, who knows? Maybe they think that a therapist is the devil. Like, I don't know. Like, it's whatever. But they've got some reason, or they're just afraid. And that's okay too. And you can validate that. Look, I get it. You're afraid. It's scary. But the great thing is that I think it's less scary to talk to someone you don't really know and, lay it all out. Because then if you've gotten the right connection, they're going to just bring unbiased curiosity and compassion into the session with you. And so you don't get a lot of that stuff that you might get from other people if you share that kind of stuff with, right? So yeah, I think hopefully I've given you some ways to kind of combat some of the things that they might say are their reasons for not doing therapy. But you know, and sometimes it just, if they're a narcissist, they're not going to go to therapy, right? So if they keep saying no, and you do some research and you start to figure out, and there's some really great resources around narcissists, and I've talked about them in some of my videos, so you can go on YouTube and check out some of my past videos. And so yeah, if you kind of figure, oh, okay, like this seems to be veering into the narcissist camp here, then it might make more sense why they won't go to therapy. Then, you know, then you can kind of make some decisions based on that information. But like, if they're just, like, if just generally speaking, they're maybe a little bit emotionally immature, or they have some anger issues, but you know, you know, it's just, it's tough. It's really tough with guys to get them to buy in. But I think it's worth it, and I think we need to keep talking to them about all the reasons why it's worth it, and what it would mean for them to do that kind of work. Not just like, well, you'll be less angry. Well, yeah, but you need to, like, you know, your children won't be afraid of you. I won't be afraid of you. I won't walk on eggshells all the time worrying about what kind of mood you're in, or whether I'm going to set you off, or I won't be worried that you're going to, you know, freak out at your boss and lose your job again, or whatever. Like, whatever it is that, you know, shows up with their anger, because it's not just them, you know, being angry. Like, there's like actions with it. There are other people affected by their behavior, right? So again, like, regardless of what it is, if it's, you know, this ongoing issue that, you know, is affecting your family life and your relationship, and, you know, if you can't have conversations around that, then that's probably when they need therapy, right? If you can't have a conversation around their behaviors and without them freaking out, then they need some therapy. Because other people who've, you know, done some work and are not triggered all the time can sit down with their partners and be like, look, you know, you seem really angry lately. What's going on? And can I do something to help? Or, you know, what would be helpful? Maybe you should sit down with your, you know, with a therapist or whatever, and them not like freak out and react and scream and holler and kick off, right? Like, they should be able to either say, no, well, you know, I've been having this going on, it's really been bothering me, and maybe you're right, like maybe I should talk to someone, or, you know, or maybe they just want to talk to you but hadn't felt like they could, or whatever. Like, that's totally different. That's totally different than someone who's like getting super defensive at even bringing up the topic, right? Or who reacts badly. So yeah, those are the ones that need it most, and they're the ones who are the trickiest to get into therapy. But, you know, it's so worth it. And I've talked to, some of my colleagues have been in those situations where they were the angry person and had to do the work. And much like why I do what I do, you know, I've worked through a lot of my anxiety and depression and whatnot, and my, you know, abandonment wounds and all those things through therapy. And because of the work that I did and how impactful it was and how helpful it was, that's what drew me to doing the work with other people and helping other women. So there's other people out there doing that same kind of work for the same reasons. So just reach out. Feel like, you know, feel free to private message me, and hopefully I can help. And if not, I give you information from other therapists that you can reach out to. So thanks, and have a great rest of your day. Namaste.